Okay, so it's lesson 8, and we've finished our shared header and footer. We did say there were a couple other things in our application we wanted to share. So one of the most obvious things we should be sharing and making global is the database connection. We talked about reasons earlier in the class. If we move hosts, if we get hacked, if someone on our team leaves, all of these are common reasons why we might have to change something in our database connection string. So we want to create a separate file, put the database connection string in there, and just share that file. Now, there was also another reason why I made you guys, why we put it in all our files, and that was so that we would get familiar with actually creating the connection string. Now that we've done it many times, we can probably put it in a separate file. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. We'll simply call it, keep it nice and short, db.php. We don't need any HTML in this file. So this will be the last time I write out the database connection string. Or you could copy and paste it. And you'll need your password, which I'll have to go and find. So make sure you're using your own credential. So I want to find all the instances, all the other instances in the project where we're connecting to the database, and we want to replace that with a require statement. We want to include our DB file instead. So I think there's going to be, I think there are 6 different pages where we're using the database. The list page, the page for the form for adding and editing, the delete page, the save page that inserts or updates, our save registration, and our validate login. All 6 of those pages are interacting with our database, so that database connection is going to be in all of them. So I think I have most of these files open. So in artist, on line 23, I'm going to replace the connection with the require once. We only need the database connection once on this page. Even if we were going to run multiple SQL commands, we should only have to connect one time. So just connect connect when we first need it, and then disconnect when we're done with our using the database for good. So that was on artist. The artist list page, same thing. We don't need it on login. We don't need it on register. Those are just forms. Those pages don't connect to the database. We don't need it in our header or our footer. So I've updated artist and artist list. Delete artist. Again, we find our database connection. Our save artist page is going to use the database, because that's where we've got our code for running an insert or an update. as well as save registration and validate. Both of those pages will have a database connection as well. So save registration and validate is the last place you have a connection. So we shouldn't see anything change visually in the site. I should just run through everything again and make sure we haven't broken anything. That I can still log in, add, edit, view, delete. So I'll try it. I'll go and log in. So oh, that's interesting. Okay, good thing we checked. This may just be a server error. Target machine actively refused. I'm just going to disconnect from the VPN for a minute and reconnect. I'm not sure if this is the server or my code. I think it's actually the server, but well, maybe I did something wrong here. Let's see. Yep. What did I miss here? What's wrong with my connection strength? Derek? Nope, there's actually something. Good guess. There's actually something on this line. Bente, you see it? Right. I missed host equals in my connection string. But no matter how many times I've typed this line, still susceptible to error. So again, better to have it in one place than in a whole bunch of places. So I missed the host equals. Okay. Okay, so my list seems to work. Login works. So everything's now working with my shared connection. So this will be easy, much easier to maintain if for any reason that database connection has to get changed. I can just change it in one spot in the application. It's shared globally. So we've got a shared header, we've got a shared footer, we've got a shared database connection. There's one other thing we should share. And that has to do with user authentication. Anybody figure out what we should share? Where else have we got a block of code that's repeated? I think we've got repeated code on 3 different pages where we could move that block of code to a separate file and we could just include that file. It's related to user authentication. Okay, and Jillian, what pages, where are we looking, where are we doing that? Okay, well, which pages are only available to authenticated users? There are 3 of them. Which 3 pages are they? Yep. So the save, the delete, yeah, and the artist form for adding and editing, right? So all three of these pages, so this page, when I'm adding and editing, the page for deleting, and the page that runs a save, all three of those have this same block of code. So on artist, right at the top, we have this. We're checking our session variable to see if we've got and if we don't, we're taking the user back to the login screen. So we've repeated this code on artist, delete artist, and save artist. So every one of these, actually, we never put it on save artist, but we probably should. So let's make a separate file and require it. And then we can replace that little block of code with a require statement. So this is the last file we'll build today. Let's make a simple file. We'll call it, why don't we just call it auth.php. You don't have to give it that name. You can call it anything you like. So on the artist page, I'm going to copy this block of code where we're checking if the user's logged in. And if the user's not logged in, we redirect them to the login page and we call exit, don't run any more code. I'm going to copy that block and dump it into the auth.php. How much of this HTML do we need in this file? None of it. There is no HTML here. So we'll just put in a block of PHP code. So on our artist page, our save artist and our delete artist, we want to require this file. That will make all of those pages private. And then if we create any new private pages, all we need to do is just require the auth file. We don't have to repeat this block of code again. So on my artist page where I had this code before, I could remove it or comment it out. But we'll just require that auth file instead, because the check now lives in this separate file. And I'm going to do the same thing on my save page and on my delete page. So on save, we'll require it, as well as on delete. We'll require it. So those pages should now all be private. If I want to check, I can just copy my delete link. I'll jump over to my private window. And rather than deleting and taking me to the artist list, it bounces me back to login. Same if I want to go to the save page. Save artist. Whoops, I put this on the wrong page. My save registration page, this needs to be public because the user doesn't have an account yet, so they need to be able to access it. So this should go on my save artist page. I've got a call session start here. We don't actually have our header on this page because this is basically an invisible page. The user never sees it. So now when I try and go there, I just get bounced back to the login page. So we can use require to make elements global, whether those elements are variables, logic like our authentication check, a variable like our database connection, or front-end HTML like our header and footer, or some combination of logic and HTML output. So most applications are put together this way. Every page we load in a browser is actually not a complete file on its own. It's usually a bunch of components that are spliced together at runtime to generate a complete, well-structured HTML page with all the logic that that page needs. So if we open up almost any site and looked at it, we're going to find some kind of template for the layout with all of the links to CSS and JavaScript and database in one place. And each file just has its own content and then all the links it needs for the supporting pieces. Does anybody have any questions about any of the things we've done today, or is there a file you'd like me to put back up, or you need to see the code? So we can wrap up a little bit early today. Next week, we're going to do a few things. I'm going to give you assignment 2. Which we'll do at the beginning of class. We will have a quick quiz next week, mostly about including files and not repeating your code. We'll look at implementing error handling. That won't take us very long, maybe an hour. We don't need a whole class to implement error handling. It's relatively simple. And then we'll also look at implementing file uploads. So how, for example, could we include either an audio file or maybe an image of each artist? For both. So how can we upload them and then have those files available for viewing or for download on the site? So we'll look at all those things next week. I'll push all my code up to GitHub now in case you need to reference any of it. That's it for this week. There's no lab. Have a good week. See you next Friday.